Fallon, how are you? Thanks very much for joining us on the Irish Food Trade Connect conversations today. It's great to see you.
Thanks a million, Margaret. Thanks for having me.
Um, I suppose we're coming very near Blas na hÉireann Awards time, and I thought it'd be an interesting time for us to have a chat. And I suppose from being really grateful to be asked as a judge on the Blas, I've probably seen a lot of the hard work that you do, and I've been amazed by it. Can you just tell me a little bit about your own background, how you got into food, and tell me how you started off?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I suppose I started off coming into Blas after my father, Artie, had founded it. So Artie founded Blas na hÉireann 17 years ago.
Wow.
But in terms of being involved in food, I had grown up in a house where dad was a food producer and before that a fisherman.
Hmm.
We also ran a guest house and we'd worked in hospitality. So it felt like I grew up very much in hospitality and in food.
Okay.
And then Artie, as a food producer, had founded the awards. So to be honest, in the very first year or two, well, more than the year or two, it was all voluntary. And in the very first year, I don't think I knew what I was getting into in terms of helping with. Dad just needed us to help
I
out
mean,
that weekend and to
you
come.
must have been you must have been young at the time, I'd say, were you?
We were mid-20s,
Yeah.
kind of early
Yeah.
20s. Yeah.
Yeah. Very
So it
good.
was, and my youngest sister is 10 years younger than me. So it was very much kind of all being brought in to help out over the weekend with this new project and this new idea that was there and something that he was kind of passionate about seeing growing. So he brought in the people he could trust, brought in the people
Yeah.
at home that could be told what was needed.
Yeah, because I think when you're starting something like that, and it's like all hands on deck, isn't it? Like, and what was Artie producing? What was he producing when he was producing?
At the time, he was value add seafood, so things like chowder or he was doing smoked mackerel pates or smoked salmon pates. So his background had always been in the fishing industry.
Right.
And then when he
Okay.
came ashore, he was working within a factory where they were making value add seafood, and then it went on to become his business. He took that business over and he was working as a producer. And it was there actually where the idea really for Blas came from,
Hmm.
because he was looking at producers having to go overseas to get an award for their product. And he sort of went, we should be able
Oh,
to have this in Ireland. And so that's
okay.
where that kind of genesis of the idea came from, was wanting to get an Irish award on an Irish product.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? That he saw an opportunity where he saw the gap. He
Yeah,
saw the gap. He saw
he
the gap.
did. And he saw so many producers who were his colleagues in the industry working hard. And, really that it should have been in a situation where they could get a recognition here on the island. Now, as he would tell you himself, it meant that in the very first year of the awards, he was shaking hands with his competitor when they won for Chowder, because, of course, he couldn't enter. So,
God, so he was still producing when the first of this started.
yeah, he was.
Okay, okay. God,
Yeah,
I mean, I suppose that's really getting something from the ground up, because working in it, and there's no word of a lie, it's not an easy job. Being a food producer is not an easy job. You know, it's it's every day in the daily grind of it. So that recognition piece is huge, isn't it? Like it's a huge piece, that because you really feel you're doing good work then if you're getting
yeah, because
recognized for it, you know?
like, for a lot of producers, like it is day to day, I mean, one of Dad's phrases, if you'll excuse the way of saying it, but is head down and arse up. Like you're just kind of stuck in production. And then to be able to every once in a while have somebody go, you're doing really well. And just
Yeah.
like for a lot of producers, they will tell us that yes, the awards might bring new listings or it might bring coverage or, increased sales. There's all of those things that you can measure. But equally, having a day or having kind of a time where the industry says to you, you're doing really well. That's like that clap on the back, I think, is just as valuable for producers to be acknowledged, to be recognized for what they're doing.
And that's a great point, because even as an employee in any business, no matter what you're doing, for someone to say to you, do you know, you're doing a good job, actually. You know, where the producers are all self-employed, there's no one to tell them. There is no one to actually on the tough days to go, you're actually doing a great job here. So that's a very important piece, no matter whether you're working in a business or whatever. Like, we all like to be told, do you know,
Yeah,
actually you're doing a decent job there. So
yeah.
that in itself is um a true value point of Blas na hÉireann, isn't it?
It was
I never thought about that now, Ed, till you said it, actually. Never thought about
it's
it
one
that
of
way.
the real kind of founding principles of it there.
Yeah, really good. And tell us your own background is, so your own background before you got involved was what? Are you still?
I I went from, so I would have always worked with mom and dad in the guest house.
Yeah,
I would have worked in hospitality here in restaurants. And then I went and trained in an arts management degree, looking at kind of events management.
okay.
From there, I worked in hotels on the events management and kind of sales and marketing side there.
Mm-hmm.
So would have kind of really enjoyed that. And it was a job where you would have been traveling quite a bit as well.
Right.
Um, but still always loved getting back to kind of back to the roots and dingle, back to hospitality, back to working with food. And then as I started kind of working a little bit more with Blas, initially doing kind of voluntary and working on the event side of things, it got to the stage where with dad and I, we could build it up to the stage where actually the two of us can work in this. We can have our wage coming from here. And we can build, we're at the stage now where we have one other person full-time in the team, and at the events you can swell it to more people.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to kind of put that time into it, to dedicate it to kind
Yeah.
of working on Blas. But it's events really is where I had come from with a real passion then for food.
Yeah. So your own background really adds. So your dad was clever. He was clever. So he has the right hands on board. And tell us, uh, this might be off key now. We haven't, but how do you get on working together? Like, he's your dad. Like, how do you get on working with together? Like, or
No, we get on really well.
yeah,
We get on really well with work. We do try and kind of, I suppose we complement each other with the backgrounds that we have. He's very much
you do, yeah.
like really rooted in food. He would have gone back and worked with FitU to do to study further in food science. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of from the knowledge point of view, you've got the two sides coming together. We did have to, in the early years when Blas was very much at the voluntary stage and, being done from the kitchen table, we had to both in my house with my husband and in their house with mom had to draw a line about the days that you talked
Oh,
about
yeah.
work and the days that you talked about family. And we've been really good actually at trying to stick to that. We try to be kind of quite diligent in having work separate to family because we're a close family as well.
And I think that's important for keeping the family relationship together, because I can imagine, like, in the voluntary days, but when it comes into it's a business entity now, you probably have to have them to keep the actual family relationship, which, to be fair, even when I was down in UCC with you, I seen, like, your own daughter was in, and
Yeah.
and very togetherness, and Artie was there, and that's even in with the academia, which, they can be quite serious, I suppose. And in the food industry, we can be, I suppose, because we have to be. Yeah, there's a huge balance there to be managed, and I thought it was done extremely, extremely professional and well in a
Thank you.
family academic setting. So kudos, well,
Thank
really
you. And
well done. Yeah,
I suppose, as you mentioned there, you did meet my daughter. She's 12 and a half now at this stage.
yeah,
And looking at the practical side of things, which every or a lot of smaller producers are as well, you still have summer holidays where you've got kids with you. And from our point of view, what we would believe is that at that point, you can be taught life skills. You can come and you can help. I mean, they're not working flat out, but they certainly need to know how to empty a bin, how to sweep the floor, how to help with the wash up, kind of all of those things to see the work that runs. And I think any of the producers that we've seen where their family business has been successful as well, you see there's kids there who understand how it's got to work. And there's huge benefits. It gives you back time as well at other stages where, you can be flexible when family need you.
Yeah, and it's a very good point, because I think sometimes, and kids that are growing up today, they have, well, now I can talk about my own too, but like, when you run a business, they have to understand that there's sometimes, look, they have to row in here, like, or they might have to, I mean, my two, actually, I'm taking them out of school on the Friday and we're going down to Blas and they're going to be with me. So like, and that's where I kind of felt when the last time I spoke to you about, you probably taught me something about my kids are going to learn. They're going to learn more down in Dingle in them 2 days than they might do being in school till 1 o'clock that day, which they finish on a Friday.
Mm.
I'd be murdered now for taking them out of school. But like, it's a different education. It's a different, like, I mean, and there's so much to learn in food, and I think now the more I've started to kind of work for myself, the more they're even interested in what I'm doing,
Mm.
because they see what I'm doing,
Yeah.
which is, it makes you very proud too as a parent, I have to say.
Mm.
It does. It does. Um, so tell us a little bit, if you can, about the process. Now, I know it's a fairly long process, but how does it all work? I probably see, like, from what I've been involved in there on the judge, like, even from being just a supply chain consultant, I'm going, geez, how does all these samples come together, and how does it all work? Because it really does work efficiently. So if you can just take us through the different stages of the process of, yeah, I'll leave it to you
Sure.
because you're the
No, like
expert.
I suppose one of the things that, and I quite like about how this works with us, is everything's quite seasonal.
Mm,
So if we start from the beginning of the year,
yeah,
now realistically, you're planning the next year from when this year's event finishes.
yeah.
But let's say if we go with the calendar year, January, February, we're in planning stages. We want to speak to kind of get the groundwork laid for all of the events, but also for our tastings, we need to be sure that we have our venues lined up for our tastings, working with the university. We need all of that in place before we open for entries every year on St. Patrick's Day. So on the 17th of March, we open and producers put themselves forward for the awards. So they enter. It's not a case that other people are nominating them. The producer chooses what they want to enter for that year's award.
Mm,
So from March through to kind of late May or middle of May is real paperwork stage. People are entering. We've lots of questions about what category should I be in, or perhaps, I'm thinking of entering 2 different products from the range. Can I enter 2 products in the same category? We're kind of at the question and the paperwork stage.
mm,
From then, because as a producer enters, they'll get their details of when to deliver for tasting. And so from then, and I think for you with supply chain, this is where it's kind of really where you're
mm,
looking at things. We start taking our deliveries of samples in. So this year we had over 3,000 entries in the awards. So that's 3,000 products that have to come into us to be tasted fairly within their category. The way we try to treat every sample as it comes into us is that it is handled as the producer would handle it. So we have to be sure that it's respected at every stage of the process as it comes in. So we take the deliveries into different locations depending on what's being tasted. So for example, the breads come into us on a date in June into a location in Dublin. For the past few years, we've been very fortunate to work with blenders in Whitestown because they have a fabulous kitchen there in their test kitchen. But the breads come into us there. They start delivering at 8 a.m. in the morning, and we close that delivery at 12 because the tasting starts then. And that tasting is complete by the end of that day. And in that case, we're working with judges from TU Dublin. But just to take those breads as one kind of follow through, people could have been entering from March all the way through. They hit one day for delivery. They bring it into us that morning. It's tasted that day. And that evening, any of the surplus bread is already moved on to be donated to one of the charities that we work with that night. So I suppose a lot of the supply chain kind of logistics behind it is thinking about how they're going to get it into us, how we're going to get it tasted at its optimal time, and then making sure that nothing's going to waste then if we can donate, that we do donate. The breads are
So,
our shortest shelf life. But for example, sorry now, but just to, if it was someone who was making whiskey, they could potentially have a window of about 3 weeks to deliver to us. So they can send it off and we just need to have it by a certain date. So there's certain types of foods that we have a longer window to work with. And to kind of plan that well, it gives us time then to where we've the really short shelf life that we can get them in and tasted at their best.
And tell me, when the suppliers are they delivering a box? Like, what way does it normally come in? Because I suppose it's easier to deliver, it's much easier to deliver a couple of pallets than a box, or get a box from A to B. It causes carnage from even samples, getting stuff. It's just, where did it go? Who got it? Who signed it in? How does all of that? Because I
So
can.
we don't ask for pallets. We ask for 3 samples of each product.
Samples, yeah.
The reason behind asking for 3 samples is for every product that comes in, we want to have a judging sample, a backup sample. So in case, for example, a jar is dropped as you're portioning it out, and a control sample. So we always hold a control because our judging goes down to decimal points. So if we have a judging that becomes very tight, that needs to go again to a panel, or if there's a query over the, any query about the product, whether it's the origin or whether it's, the query from the judges about whether it was in the right category or something like that, we need to be able to pull a control sample off the shelf. And that's where I suppose what we do is really rooted in academia, and that comes from, the control is really coming from the academic side there. So for a producer, we're asking them to send 3 samples with their entry code. So they have a unique entry code which follows them through from March, from their paperwork goes in, all the way through to when the awards are announced in October. They have a unique code for that product, and it needs to be displayed on each of those 3 products as it comes into us at the delivery door. And the reason for that being on each product, and this kind of really gets down into the logistics of it, is as the 3 samples come into us, they get separated. So just like directors of a company being put on different planes, they get separated into 3 different locations. So as if something happens with the fridge or with, anything, something could happen, that you've got an exact replica of that delivery sitting in the storage next door.
Okay, so nothing really, even if something was to go missing, there's risk mitigated there. You're never really going to have to go back really to the producer to say, we didn't get that, because you already have it. You already have that. That's a fantastic safeguard against any
And we have
issues.
to do that. Like, you think, as you mentioned, it's difficult for a producer to get a sample to us. Like, they're putting a huge amount of time and cost, whether it's being sent to the courier or whether delivering directly, or even if they're doing shared deliveries, which we encourage. It takes a lot for them to get it to us. So we need to be sure that that's, we need to know, if we're saying we have this, that we have it. Or in the case, it's happened to us before where a producer was saying to us, I've got 5 entries in with you. You've only confirmed receipt of 4. You definitely have 5. And we're going, definitely don't. Because we know, aside from the 3 delivery storage, or aside from the 3 storage sections, we 3 checkpoints. It has to pass through 3 individual sets of hands and 3 individual checkpoints. So we can be sure to say, no, we actually don't. And as it turned out in this particular case, we were able to kind of have that confidence. And for that producer, and they phoned us back and they were lovely about it. And they said, we found it in the back of the van. 4 were delivered to you. The 5th just happened to be sitting behind a box, which was fine. And we could work it out and they could get it to us on time. But it meant that we could trust all of those safeguards that we had put in place.
There's huge governance, it sounds, and controls in your process, which even a lot of businesses don't have it all, or maybe they might have some, but from what you're telling me there's a huge governance and control that really you can always say, well, actually, we didn't get that, or you know, because there's such a safeguarding going on, which is, and was that always the way, or was that a learning that happened something through the years, or was that just always the way it was done
Some
from
of
the get-go?
some of the extra protocols would have been learnings down through the years. We're
Okay.
always trying to learn, how can we improve logistics? How can we kind of help make this more efficient or increase those safeguards? But a lot of the principles of it and a lot of those would always have been in place, for two reasons.
Mhm.
One is that with Artie coming from the background of being a producer, he is always looking at things from the producer's point of view to say, well, what would I want? If this was landing to me, you know, if I was sending this off, what would I want? And things like, I'd want to get a note back to say, we have that. Thanks very much. It's here safe and sound. So as soon as we could build that into our online entry system, that you could tick a little box that says received, and that generates an email. As soon as we could do that, it went in place, because he's looking at it from the producer's point of view. The second reason why we would have safeguards like that in place is we are a really small team. Like, being very practical, we need to know that they're in place, because it's us that's going to be looking for them, or it's us that's going to
You're going to
be.
be dealing with the problem if it is.
So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's like anything. If you're doing it, you want to be sure that it's done to the best of your abilities and to kind of cover each base, which maybe is coming from the event side as well. So, like, even little things like having worked in hotels for so long, you learn things like you're not confirming a meeting just with a date. You're saying, I will see you on Friday the 30th. You have the day and the date. If you can have two things in that sentence, it means if you have your date mixed up or your day mixed up, the other person can pick it up. So
Yeah.
it's things like that that you've maybe learned even in other experiences, that you think, well, it's easier to do it and have it in place than skip it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's actually it's nearly a work ethic as well. You know, when you're actually the detail of your work. And it sounds that every single thing you do is high detail. Even to have an online system where there's an automatic email sent, we've received now, so there's no confusion. And a lot of that is detailed in work ethic as well. I think it's just, you wouldn't see that everywhere, which is fantastic, fantastic. And then once you get once you have samples in, tell us a little bit about the judging then, the judging element of it.
Sure. So the judging it was developed hand in hand with UCC. So our academic director is Professor Joe Kerry in UCC, and his team would have worked with Artie in the early stages to develop a method of judging which is rooted in sensory and which could be used across multi-categories. So it could be the same judging process could be implemented across vinegars and steaks. You know, it's the same scoring system that works for almost all of our categories. The way that we score, firstly, it's entirely blind. So what's presented to the judges is completely out of its packaging. It has nothing to indicate who has made it, where it's come from, what size of a producer it is. So there's all of those elements that could influence you are removed. So if, for example, it's a piece of chocolate that you're tasting, that chocolate will be presented on a plate with just the entry code. There'll be nothing else with it. Then the judges, and it's a panel of judges that are asked to score it. The panel will taste individually. They can't discuss with each other. So from our point of view, we ask the judges not to confer. And that was an early learning in kind of the very beginning as it was being developed. One of the things we saw is that the judges were coming from all different backgrounds, which is what we wanted. We wanted people who were academics, people who were food writers, buyers, industry, and home cooks. It's a big part of our panels because that's who's buying it and putting it on the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what we saw early on was that if, for example, you had the food writer from a really well-known Irish paper sitting beside a home cook, and that food writer says, don't think much of that. But no matter what the home cook, you know, no matter what level of confidence you have, it's very hard to sit beside somebody who's recognized as a kind of an industry leader and go, oh, well, I disagree with that. But from our point of view, we wanted every judge's scores to be completely independent and to carry the same weight. So there's no conferring within the system. The judges don't discuss with each other what they're tasting. And then the judges are asked to score on 5 different areas. So they're scoring on the appearance, as in the physical appearance of the food, the aroma and the flavor, the texture, the overall impression of quality. So do I think this is a quality product? And then the 5th one, which is another subjective point, is the mass appeal. And with the mass appeal, we're not asking, do you think that this is we're not saying, do you think commercially this will be successful, but rather, would you put this on the table for family and friends? Or if this was in the fridge at home, would it be just you eating it? Because sometimes a judge might have something that they love and it's a really particular flavor, but they know that this is just going to sit in the jar and it's not going to be, the other 5 people in the house aren't going to eat this one. So it just gives a little bit of room to acknowledge that actually, or in the case of, for example, like a clear one that we would use would be something like blue cheese. If a judge loves the strongest blue cheese possible and they're given, kind of a milder cheese, it gives them room to say, but actually, if I was doing a cheese board, this would have a place on it. So that's where the mass appeal comes into play then.
I think that's a huge point, because we all have very individual tastes, and especially in the family home, I mean, it can be, I find it frustrating at times that I might love something, but I'm the only one eating it because the kids won't touch off it, and it's beautiful, but they just don't recognize. And maybe all our palates are different. So I think that question in itself, it might tell a different story if you gather all those results together. Like, so from even a market research piece, what type of consumer actually likes that kind of a product? So I think that's a very smart question.
And we had a really interesting example a few years ago where a producer was making a chocolate, and they asked us to look at the scores afterwards, which we did happily, and we looked at feedback and had a call with them. And it was actually not so much in the mass appeal, but in the aroma and flavor. Some of the panel were scoring the flavor really, really high, and some of the panel were scoring it lower. And when we got down into it, we discovered that it really was a real kind of Marmite flavor for people. And when we spoke to the producer, they're saying, oh yeah, that happens because it's a very particular flavor. They were actually recreating a flavor like when you tip the milk at the end of a bowl of cereal, as a kid.
Yeah.
They wanted to recreate that flavor. So when we dug down into it, the panelists who were there who really loved that flavor had grown up either in Ireland or in countries where dairy was a staple part of the diet.
Wow.
And those where it dropped, dairy hadn't been a staple part of the diet. They live in Ireland now, they're Irish consumers, but they didn't have that childhood memory to connect with.
That's unreal. I can't believe
it
that.
It is interesting to get down into it.
God, that's unreal. Like, that's really, like, actually, if that's really great information to document as well, even from an academic point of view, because you've just brought me back there to something from my own childhood, because I grew up on a dairy farm. None of the milk was pasteurized. We used to get it from the tank. And we used to have our cornflakes, like there was nothing else going at the time when but the taste of the milk in the bottom of the bowl, like, so you'd have your cornflakes. You're just taking me back about, I don't know how many years there, Fallon. Like, and that would be a taste that not everyone would have, like, and it's something you forget. That information is powerful.
Well, for the producer in particular, they found it very helpful because it meant that they could tailor who that particular chocolate should be given to.
Wow. That must make you very proud of your work then, when you're actually able, them findings are able to go back to a producer to target an audience. Like, that's nearly the business in itself, nearly. isn't it?
It is, and it gives you great faith in the system that you're working with.
Yeah, yeah, serious faith in it. And so when all the judging is done, then what
Mhm.
happens after that then? So what
So
happens? So you're
the
getting ready
next
for
stage,
awards time.
well, the very first thing is you have to give the results to the producers.
Okay.
So the very first stage is that those who haven't made it through to the finalist stage, and it is a hard stage to get through to,
Mhm.
they're the very first to find out. And that again was coming from Marty's background as being a producer, saying, I don't want someone standing on a market stall beside somebody celebrating when they haven't got their results yet. So the
Yeah.
very first results to go out are those who didn't get through, which in the early years was very laboursome because it was all individual emails. Now we have a system which has sped it up a little bit.
She's
Um,
with that many entrants. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
but now we have a system which has sped it up a little bit. But the next to find out are those who've got through to the finalist stage. So now we're working with them kind of from mid-August through to the awards, which are the first weekend in October, to help them promote that they're a finalist. So whether that's getting some of the Blas labels that they put on pack, some of the little shiny finalist 24 stickers, or they're putting together their social media posts. We also work on press releases county by county, so we can really celebrate the finalists, because what producers would tell us, and again, it's from getting down into kind of surveys with them, is that their local and their regional sales are hugely important to them. So actually the coverage in their local paper is the one which will drive sales in those few weeks, because people say, oh, I saw this is up for an award, we might try it. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing on one side of things now. And the other is the logistics of the events, which is now building a whole Blas village. This will be our third year of having a Blas village, where we have a number of different venues that producers and industry will come and kind of gather, network over the weekend, learn from each other. From our point of view, all that's really changed in those events over the years is we've learned, we've gotten a little bit bigger in the events. We've kind of added elements on, but we've always tried to retain that it's about a producer getting down and connecting with someone who will help drive their business on.
Yeah, and that's another piece of it as well. And I think that weekend is a very, very important piece for an awful lot within the food industry, because there's a lot of the retail attend, and there's a lot of connecting, chatting, talking with people actually, that because a lot of these producers are selling locally, but they mightn't be selling nationwide. And it's the nationwide coverage of getting store coverage with the trade, which is
Yeah.
a huge, huge piece for them, and connecting. Because from my own experience of dealing with retailers for over nearly 20 years, trying to get a meeting with a retailer is nigh near important. They don't, so they simply don't have the time. But this is a very casual way of just showcasing your product to someone that's actually just down there for the weekend,
We've
enjoying a
had
bit of.
people we've had people come back to us to say, I have been knocking on that door virtually for a year, and I
Yeah,
happen to be standing behind them in the queue for coffee. Or
yeah.
I sat down and had a pint in X pub and you wouldn't believe who was sitting beside me. And I suppose there's one of the benefits of the awards being in Dingle, and it has always been in Dingle. It's our home. This is where Blas is. And it is a fair drive for a lot of people, which we always laugh about, because we kind of go, the road to Dublin takes the same length of time regardless of which direction you're going. But lots of people will go, God, it's a fair drive to get down to Dingle. But when people are here, they've committed to be here.
Yeah.
And there is that kind of shoulders drop a little. People are relaxed into the events. They're here for the few days. They're usually in jeans. It's kind of, people are kind of relaxing a little bit. So we try and keep the events like fast paced in terms of networking, but informal, where people can kind of get a chance to say a quick hello, even if it is for a producer to have a very quick hello in the queue for coffee, and then be able to next week shoot that person an email. it's
Yeah.
already, it's opened a door at that stage.
And that door is so important to open. So important to open, because I suppose it's volume, it's volume make and economies of scale then for the producers that make it profitable, you know. So having that showcase open in a very casual environment, you know, and in such a beautiful part of the country. She couldn't get a
Yeah.
nicer part of the country, you know. So it is like it's like going on a break. That's the
Mm.
way I kind of even felt last year when I went down. It was like a lovely break. It was a lovely break for me, and it's not that awfully far from my own home place. So I drove home after that and I had a little bit of time on my own, and it just, yeah, I just, you know, and that's why it's going to become a family event for me this year. I'm bringing the kids with me, and let them see that actually there's people down here that work really hard on producing, you know, that they mightn't even actually think, God, the amount of work that goes into producing this. I think it's an educational piece, it's a connection piece, it's a huge, huge part
Well,
of doing trade.
and
Yeah,
the educational one is what I'm glad you mentioned there, because just to kind of come back to your point there on volume and on national, there was a number of years ago where we were seeing producers who were coming down for the weekend and they were perhaps having opportunities put in front of them, which maybe they weren't just ready for. So they were potentially being offered a national listing, but at the moment they weren't doing that volume at all. And it was going
okay.
to be a big scale up, or it was going to be kind of a big kind of challenge for them. And there was one producer in particular who Artie went and sat at their kitchen table afterwards and said, please don't sign anything until we come and have a chat. And he went and sat with that producer and talked with her and talked about, is this actually, you know, where you want the business to go? And for some producers, that is exactly where they want to go. They want to be national. They want to be, and that's right for their business. For others, it's not. For others, they maybe need to be looking at food service, or they may be looking at independent stores. And Artie came away from that chat in particular and came back to Dingle and said, we have to do something that's actually arming people with information for that weekend as well. So out of that was born a venue that we have called the Backyard at Blas, where we have panel discussions. I mean, you know it,
Yeah,
taking place
yeah.
right across the weekend.
Hmm.
And part of the kind of core values of that, which thankfully we've now had the support of Bank of Ireland in kind of keeping that venue running, is to educate producers, to help them be ready to kind of think, do I want to take this opportunity, or, you know, do I need to look at a different path, whether it's kind of thinking about retail versus food service or independent versus nationwide retail, or getting to meet another producer who's had the same challenges with redeveloping a brand or finding finance when they want to scale up. So it was something that we really had to look at bringing into the events, because we felt a responsibility, because at the end of the day, Blas was putting an opportunity in front of these producers, but potentially putting challenges down the line if they weren't ready for that jump.
And
So that
yeah,
was a really important thing for us to put in place.
great point, because, and a lot of the work I do is, you know, if a business isn't operationally ready to take on volume, and this is where I find supply chain, I often say supply chain, from the raw materials that you buy all the way out to the how you actually produce the thing and out the back door. If that's not solid, then you can't deliver to that customer. You're going to let them down. The relationship is going to break down. And it's a huge, it's a huge thing that maybe some producers mightn't see the risk at the time,
Mhm.
that, you know, oh God, we've an opportunity to get in here. Let's just take it. And then when it comes to, you can't get the people to pack it, to produce it, you can't get the machinery, you can't get the materials, and all these things start to creep in.
Mhm.
So that's a huge, huge piece. And it's funny how you said there, you felt you had a responsibility, because you're given that opportunity to showcase. And that still, that it could be, even though it's an opportunity, it still has to be risk managed,
Mhm.
because there's a huge, lots of different parts there. And I suppose dealing with different sectors, whether you sell online and you have a bit more control of it, but you need strong logistics. Going into retail is a whole different ballgame. Food service is very different again. they're all very different, and they're all managed very differently. So that piece of education, and you also do a mentoring program as well, don't you? Do you a mentoring program as well to help the producers? And what's part of the mentoring program then? What happens when there's mentoring involved?
We have two elements actually. So that backyard venue grew then to become the backyard on the road.
Okay.
And we started taking it around the country where producers who maybe weren't at the finalist stage, or maybe this year weren't taking part, but had taken part in the past, we wanted to open it up.
Yeah.
And we then were very fortunate to be able to start working with Taste for Success, who have
Fantastic.
supported us in
Yeah.
those events. They also mean that we have had I suppose, initially the online move came during COVID because
Right.
we had to move online, but producers fed back to us that actually they quite liked that. So from the way our calendar works now, we tend to have both on the road events in the spring, but also online events in the springtime, which are open to any producer to sign up for. So any producer who's
Okay.
there at work, and I would say to any producer to sign up to our newsletter, because certain things like that aren't limited to those who are taking part. Our core kind of value is still to support the food industry. And there are some producers who it mightn't be the year for them to take part. They might be focusing on buying a new van that year rather than
Yeah.
going to an awards. So the spring one is open to everyone. Then we have one which is dedicated for finalists at this time of year. So coming up in just over a week, we will have the finalist backyard sessions online. Those will be delivered by our mentors, and the finalists can then apply to work with one of our mentors throughout the autumn. So then they would have mentoring sessions, which are limited spaces, but fully funded by Taste for Success. So it's
Fantastic.
huge benefit to a producer who's engaged. Somebody who has gotten to the finalist stage and thought, yeah, I'm going to make the most of this. I'm going to grab it with both hands. So they've connected with us in those online sessions, and then they can go on to avail of the mentoring where there's spaces available.
That's really good, isn't it? Because there's a lot, and I see it across my own training and development, and spending money on training development is a huge challenge for anyone in a small to medium sized business. The funds might not be there. So, and that educational piece is huge. That's very important for the next right step to be taken. So that's an excellent service. So I really feel between both this huge synergy here between the industry experience and the academic learning, which is, something that a lot of people maybe, like, look, we learn things as we go along in our life, but we might need reminding of certain things. I know things that I might have learned 10 years ago aren't as fresh in my head so those kind of refresher and the industry's dynamic, it changes very fast. Very fast. The trends, I mean, when we look at things since COVID and the way things have gone, sure, it's a very fast pace. So you need people on the pulse to be able to bring the producers through it. So it's a fantastic service as well, isn't it?
It is. And the thing is, like, you need not just the mentors, but what we see is producers connecting with each other who are also watching out for those kind of trends or opportunities that might come up. And we would see producers who've made friends through kind of being part of the awards, where they might see something arise and think, well, it's not for me, but I know that, Patrick would love that. So I'm going to send that on to them. And we hear back afterwards about where they've made a connection, and then they can support each other down kind of throughout the year, whether it's bouncing advice off one another or just having somebody else who's in the same boat that they can pick up the phone to and go, I'm having an awful challenge here getting these glass jars. What did you do? I see you have the same jars. And we see that producers are working together like that to watch kind of everything that's happening.
And that connection, because we all need a network of people. We all need a network of people because, and I'm so grateful for the connection of, I suppose, I'd be honest, a lot of people that are in the same line of work as me, and I can reach out to them and I can honestly say, do you know what, I have a struggle with that. And then it kind of helps you, because you still have to get up and get on with it. And it, like, and a lot of days are hard. Then sometimes you can be very tired from the work you do. And especially in that kind of a job where you've orders coming at you, you've customers coming at you, and you need to be able to deliver. And at the end of the day, we're only people. Another point actually that Blas is this, it's an island of Ireland. The awards are open to everyone across the Republic and into Northern Ireland. Was that always the case? Because there's a huge cross-border trade development is a huge piece now. So I think Blas has done that very well. It's been open to, like, I think last year when I was there was a company had travelled from the very north of Ireland down to Dingle, and I think they drove but they were like, so they're coming from all parts of the country, which is fabulous. So
Yeah.
was that always the intention, that it was an island of Ireland?
It was always island of Ireland, and I don't think there was ever any consideration for it to be
Fantastic.
anything different. It was about the food that's from this island, and it was kind of as straightforward as that. And you do see people travel, and what's great is you see producers maybe traveling from the same network of producers. And as you mentioned it, I'm just thinking of one group in particular who travel from right the other end of the country, and we're walking into one of the bars one night, and you see one of them sitting up at the counter holding a sing-song with all of his fellow producers from that region. So, people kind of really, it's a big effort to travel, and we appreciate the huge effort that people go to, whether it's from that side of the country or, someone in a bakery in Tralee who needs to close it for the day to get to the awards. Like that's
that's
same
true.
effort is going in there.
Same effort,
But
it's
it
true.
was always going to be all island.
Fantastic. Because I think, like, I suppose it is all Irish food, and I think and to say someone could be in a pub in Dingle having a sing-song with their own producers that they mightn't see any day of the week. Do you know that sort of way? Because like that in itself is community, like.
Yeah.
And I suppose Blas na hÉireann has a huge network. So you obviously believe hugely in network. And both yourself and Artie would have attended the Irish Trade Connect Forum last year. And I suppose the aim of the Trade Forum was really to help people trade more profitably, because it's a bloody hard, like, it's hard to make a crust in it. Like, I mean, there's other industries. Now, I suppose I've only always worked in food, but the margins in food are very different to margins in others. So that connection of people, and I feel you probably have the same value on networking. Like, do you network much yourself, or do you get out a good bit? Like, I suppose you meet an awful lot of people as you go.
We do.
But,
and like, we try to make a conscious effort to travel and to go to as much as we can. And like, we would have gone to the forum last year, which both of us found very beneficial. Artie's a great man for always saying, if I come away from something with one nugget, then I'll have learned something. So I think any event that you go to, and there was certainly more than one nugget at the forum last year, but both from the speakers and when you get a chance to kind of have a chat with somebody over lunch, like, you are away from your day to day. So you've given that time. So if you're going to give the time to travel to it, you might as well use it as well. So we found it hugely beneficial, and we would have always, we'd always try and travel to certain things. Obviously, you have to plan,
You do. And you have to
pick time out of things.
You have to pick and choose what you go to as well. Yeah.
I think you do always get great benefit from going to something where you can kind of build that network.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I think like that. I know from working in industry for years that sometimes the head was down. And if I actually went out and networked, I might have got the answer out from somebody else that might have been able to help me. Because it can be very difficult, like, especially if you're under pressure on the money side, or you can't get a sale, and you've bought a piece of machinery and the sales are not just coming through to hit the return on investment, and that all that is down on the bottom line. And that's just to support and educate, I suppose, and to create that network of people where they feel that they don't, yes, of course, there's going to be commercial sensitivities, but I suppose, like that, people talk with people and people discuss like whether we like it or not. They do talk about price, like, do you know what they do. So I suppose that it's done in a safe space and connecting with different people.
Yeah.
So you're Fallon, it's a hectic time now for the next 4 weeks.
It is.
How is the diary looking for the next 4 weeks, or how are you set up for
Pretty
Dingle
tight.
2025, I'd say?
The diary is looking pretty tight. We're at the
Yeah,
stage where we're planning all of the logistics now at the minute, which is
yeah,
it's great to see kind of all of the different supports and the different teams that you work
yeah,
with together, down to things like this afternoon we're going to be meeting with the team who do the AV for the backyard. So it's
okay,
all of those logistics kind of come together. So it's busy.
yeah. But good busy, which is
Good
great.
busy and enjoyable
And
busy.
an enjoyable busy. And you know what they say, when you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
Mhm.
And I kind of, I always keep that to the top of my head. If I don't enjoy something, then why am I doing it? So,
Yeah.
and I can even see, the smile on your face there. You really love what you do. It's
It is.
very, very, you do love what you do. And that's so important. Fallon, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on today. And thank you so much you've given us a wealth. I mean, there's things I've learned from what you've said there that I never knew. They just clicked a few light bulbs, and you've brought me back a bit as well. So
You
I'm
can have
really,
your cornflakes for breakfast
oh my
tomorrow.
cornflakes for breakfast. Like, it's amazing, isn't it? Like, you think you forget things from your childhood, and next thing all of a sudden someone just says one thing, and off we go. I think we just have we one question? Ah, thank you, Sharon. Sharon Noonan just says great interview. Thanks to Fallon and Margaret. So it was fantastic, Fallon. I'm so looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. I'll have myself and my two co-pilots down with me. So I'm really looking forward to it. And best of luck with the planning from
Likewise.
here to
Thanks a
then.
million.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a million, Fallon. Take
Thanks,
care.
Margaret. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye bye.